Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Bible, episode 11. Today we are here with José Ortega. José, nice to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, this is kind of our first time meeting, and obviously it's the first time that our guests are meeting you. So, give us your elevator pitch.
Yeah, thanks so much to be here. Excited to see young Latino hustlers in Texas putting out content and really cultivating the right messages and ideology for our community and also for other entrepreneurs. So really excited to be here to contribute to that. So yeah, I'm José Ortega. I was born in Odessa, Texas. My mom and dad immigrated from Mexico. My mom picked melons in West Texas as an agricultural worker. So I grew up in a really blue-collared family. Really the values of, going to church, working hard. We're living work to week. And, I really enjoyed a lot of my childhood in that community. A lot of the values of, progressing and family and hard work. Growing up there was, as we all know, there's always challenges in our upbringing, and everyone has them in different ways. Ours was definitely very socio-economic, but I was really fortunate to have good teachers, specifically like my Spanish teacher and my physics teacher, to help empower me to, go to school and seek an education and put the right ideas in my mind. And also my mom, she was really a big advocate of that. So I specifically went to Texas Tech, studied civil engineering and environmental. My mind opened after I studied abroad in the Czech Republic, spent some time in South America, helping a family kind of innovate in the agriculture business and propellers and flying planes and fumigating, which is just agricultural work. So that really opened up my mind to entrepreneurship. So after graduating Texas Tech, I worked for Schlumberger. Many people know the company at the time. It had 110,000 employees, and went to work in Argentina. Spent 3 years working there, about 8 months in Russia, and then some time in Brazil as well, as an engineer and working in the energy business. So after kind of getting my feet wet and hustling and working there, I started my own company in 2014, basically using everything I learned abroad. So use the engineering kind of frameworks and problem-solving skills that I did at Schlumberger to consult. So I consulted for some private large energy companies in Midland in Odessa, Texas, where I was out in the field helping manage large teams and innovating using problem-solving skills to reduce the cost of fracking. So that was really exciting, and it's really when I really had the opportunity to provide like generational wealth difference for myself. And then got the opportunity to work at a startup that raised $75 million in venture debt. I was a COO when I was 26. That went on to get acquired, like a forced acquisition, through some circumstances that we specifically didn't see coming, but definitely helped me get the experience and the exposure that I needed to go on and do more. And then I helped start a company called Terra Midstream, which was a midstream company in West Texas as well, an infrastructure company, and was a vice president of that company. And then really started, looking at different techs to apply in the energy business, and everything from evaporating water to putting data into the cloud and selling that data or showing that data to companies, and then also consulting other tech startups in energy. So I started Bitcoin mining and looking at that in 2018, really before anyone was looking at it, and really felt the kind of the biases of being a Latino entrepreneur and also like kind of new to the startup and the raising cash kind of space. I had a hard time getting funded, so then I started to look at other opportunities, and I moved to Austin to work for Revel. So at the time, Revel had raised a $27.4 million Series A. You can correct my facts if I think that's the right number, and moved to Austin to launch Revel and scale the Texas market. So that was my first kind of bite into tech, and loved that. was getting close to a contract with UT to bring the mopeds onto campus. Talking to the parks to have the mopeds on the parks. We were close to signing a contract with Favor to have like the Favor runners on the mopeds as well. So that was really exciting, but COVID kind of wiped that out. We were going to have a big South by Southwest event. So after that, I started working for a company called Rex.com, where I was a CEO of a venture studio company where I built software. That was a really great couple years, and then had the opportunity now to get into venture capital. So now I joined a new startup, a new fund, a debut fund called Top Line Ventures, and I am a partner at the firm.
Very extensive review.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit longer than an elevator pitch,
Yeah.
but that was a long elevator, but a great review.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanna go in?
I guess let's just go from the beginning chronologically. You said civil and environmental.
Yeah.
And then what was it like? I know you said you learned tons going all around the world. At what point were you, why didn't you just keep doing that and go to the next country and the next country? Did that opportunity end, or did you close that book and decide to start your own thing here?
Yeah, I think when you're young and you have just graduated as an engineer and you kind of have circumstances like I did, you have a hard time really defining like the code of your brain and like why you do what you do, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I've got a degree. I now have a marketable skill. I want to go find an exciting job. So I think that, with time, you learn to define why you do the things you do and then build the life you want. So at the time, for me, it was very it was simple. It was like, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I paid my student loans off. I think I paid like $30,000 in a couple years just working and hustling and saving all my money. And then the reality was that I was just tired of being in the middle of nowhere. I've had a thought that if something happens in my family, I'm not going to know what would happen to them. I just need to change my circumstances. At the time, we were working like 90 days straight and 3 days off as an international mobile engineer. So it's very, very intense. So I decided that I just needed a more sustainable lifestyle. And at the time, just serendipitously, like the shell revolution that made the United States energy independent was booming. So there was needing a lot of these people that knew how to frack, right? Because it was so new in 2013 and 2014. So I fortunately had received training at the best service company in the world for that. So very quickly, I was able to find a job as a consultant and start my LLC. And really, I heard through the grapevine, like, hey, they're paying consultants a bunch of money per day. I was like, great, sounds great. Go back home and make more money. Let's go. So to me, it was a very impulsive, wanting to better my circumstances decision.
Was this consulting firm Midland Basin Partners? Is that what it was?
So that was the name of the startup that I joined after. So at the time, I was consulting for myself. It was really funny because when I got to my job interview, like, hey, we're gonna hire you as a consultant for ConocoPhillips at the time. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, oh, you need an LLC. I said, okay, great. Well, where can I get one of those? So I went and I called some people and they told me where to go. And sitting in front of the person that was helping me set it up, I had a blue truck at the time. So I just looked outside the window and I named that LLC Blue Tornado. So I still operate that LLC. And it was just like something I thought of on the day. So that was the name of my LLC, just like on the spot thought of the name. And then second, Midland Basin Partners, there's actually a press release on that. My best friend got into Harvard Business School, and then he met a classmate that was working with Midland Basin Partners as it was starting to raise money. So I got introduced to them, and they said, hey, we're looking for someone that knows West Texas and engineering and water. And I said, sure, I know how to do that. So I got hired as a COO, and then we went on and raised the venture debt from a firm out of New York.
Awesome. And how much was the round?
At the time, the way that venture debt kind of works is usually you have to have like equity in the company or enough assets and to leverage in order to actually raise the debt. So actually the CEO of the company was a very wealthy man from South Texas that already was in the business, and he put up his own assets to raise the cash. So really just was fortunate to have a partner that had the means, and he raised $75 million.
Wow. So, walk us kind of through that first experience being, an executive. What was it like? What did you learn? What mistakes did you make?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was definitely way over my head, and I was really lucky to have had the opportunity, but also, in some way, not necessarily like the mistakes kind of be on my dime, right? Like, but also the person that hired me was aware of my experience and was willing to roll the punches. So I think the experience was one, you're in charge of everything, right? Versus like you have a certain role. So I think that pressure really intuitively made me super accountable for everything that I was doing. Mm-hmm. So what that came with was like lots of contractors working for me, managing a budget. And what you'll find when you're managing like a huge P&L, some service providers want to do a good job for you, but other ones want to hustle you too, right? So I think I definitely had a mix of both, where I, thought I was working with people that were doing a good job, but also, probably weren't doing the best job, or like using the wrong materials, or just trying to figure out a way to like really make a profit from what we were doing. So I think to me, there's a lot of learning that you go to in terms of negotiation, but also the emotional intelligence that when things go wrong, how do you evolve and deal with those? So I think that first time being an executive for me was definitely kind of like a baptismal by fire. But I learned so much from the experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, because like for me personally, I I went into it thinking like, oh, I can do this. And, obviously I think I could, but I didn't understand just how intensive it was going to be. And I think that's a problem for a lot of first time founders, and a reason why a lot of people crash and burn is because you really don't understand like how many hours you have to put into it and what kind of dedication it takes to actually make something successful. And sometimes it can be out of your control. Sometimes there are external factors, or even like I think luck can sometimes play a role, but you really do have to like bust your ass.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think what you said about you're in charge of everything, I think that is also something that people coming from an employee mentality don't really have to worry about, because especially at a large company, your role is so narrow and defined. You basically stay in your little sandbox and you don't go anywhere else. But like, as an executive, and albeit my company is small, Mateo's was small, I'm sure your role was you were managing a lot more things, but even at a micro level, it's kind of very demanding on your organizational skills, your stress capacity of being able to not be completely in a whirlwind because something went wrong, and having the, you said, emotional intelligence to kind of, calm down, act logically, and not just freak out. Especially like some people freak out when like something small happens, but when you got millions and millions on the line, I bet that was there a moment that you're able to disclose where something went wrong and you had to come save the day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that happens to every person, like on an executive team or a founder. As a founder of my consulting firm, or also a founder of this venture studio company that I just recently was, or even in this role, what you find is that there's always expectations from yourself, stakeholders, and then your customers, right? So when you think about like where does all the kind of root cause of demands come from, you have to know how to compartmentalize and how to deal with that, right? And I think compartmentalizing isn't necessarily like oppressing your feelings. It's more about knowing how to prioritize what comes first and what's not, right? So I think that, usually what I find is the more experience I have, the calmer I am. And I think like one thing, kind of bringing it back to like being like Latino, or sort of any person that has adversity, you already have so much in your family and like in your background that you had to deal with in order to like have the opportunity, that you're already built to have like a lot more resilience in like that when everything's at stake, right? So I think I was very fortunate that what seemed natural to me, you know, was I think some people struggle with, and I think it had to do with my upbringing, having like a tough family background, or having, you know, socioeconomic challenges. They really mold you into having the calluses that you need to depend on whenever you're building something and you're managing a team. So I think the mentality, really what it comes down to, is one, accepting that you are worthy and you deserve to be there. Second, like having accountability of like everything that goes on. And then ultimately like being a good steward of someone else's money, right? Because unless it's your own cash, you have to make sure that you're a good steward of the resources that are being there. So I think it's like it's a multi-layer thing that's involved, but I think that's kind of my thoughts around like some of the stresses is really prioritization, putting yourself in the right mental model, but also like ensuring that you have enough self-awareness to know like you're putting the right ideas into your mind.
So after this experience, did that kind of excel you to get your position at Terra Midstream?
So I absolutely, like, in fact, it turned out that we had like a forced acquisition slash kind of situation where like our main partner in the deal kind of, you know, had a different goals. So I just, you know, left this team after like having built it, right? And my experience then 100% when I got introduced to this team, what I was really lucky was like my values and the culture and like the integrity of like this new team was like a lot more in line with mine. But they needed my skill set, right? So what you find is like really interesting is there's like this big misconception that, oh, your skill set, you know, like if you're like let's just say a manager or you're an engineer on a team, that you don't have like what it takes to be like in the executive position. In reality is not, right? It's like the only thing that separates you as a person is your ability to negotiate a better position, right? Which is like, oh, I'm negotiating with investors that I found the solution, that I'm the right person, that I know what it takes to make it done for a much larger percentage of the company, right? And they're negotiating that their cash and their resources deserves a portion of that. So if you think about that, like my experience from this first executive role, I knew coming in that I already have done a lot of what they wanted to do in the future. So, and that also I was wanting to work with people that were more aligned in my values, right? So bringing those two things to the table and them seeing that made them awesome. Like this person knows what they want, right? So it was an incredible 2 to 3 year journey. And I think that's where I saw a lot of success, where we built this company and really scaled these services.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned is really important, like having people in your corner that share your values. Could you kind of speak a little bit on like what those values are and maybe what in your past, I guess, relationships, the values that you felt like weren't being shared or followed?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think it's like even you as evolving, right? It's like before I said I didn't really know what was important to me and why I did what I did. I think as you like live through life and you have good experiences and bad experiences, they're all learning experiences. So it's really important to maintain a growth mindset, right? And that's like a very like in like psychology, it's like the number one thing that I think that defines like a successful person and a non-successful person is they think that their problems and challenges are like reasons to give up or reasons that they're not good enough, right? It's like, oh, because I did this and I tried this, now I suck and I can't do this. Or because that person did that, they're a horrible person and they're not worthy of me. So I think it's really important and very careful to really, like, that's my number one value, right? Is I learned that, oh, I need to be with people that see failure and like adversity as like a thing to fuel the right things, right? Like that's number one, I think. It's like, and then two, I think also like having a collaborative mindset that every human at the table that's in the room has like an equal value. Usually that comes down to ego, and like it's the second like virtue and value is is everyone serving the mission, or is everyone serving their own agenda, right? Because like if we're on a team and we're working, like what may matter most to me is that I'm a CEO, and like this is my identity and my ego, right? But the mission may get behind that. Well, then at the end of the day, like what is the team doing? They're serving me, not necessarily everything, right? Hypothetically speaking, right? So I think that's the second virtue, right? Is that is everyone here serving the mission, which is the business and the customers, right? So growth mindset, like collective alignment. And then the other one is like really, a form of like respect and like health in terms of like your willingness to always evolve, right? It's like, do you specifically, as you go through challenges of like entrepreneurship or dealing with problems or managing people or dealing with like a bad investor, do you take that experience and like, or then become an asshole to everyone on your team, right? Or do you take that experience and then like make everyone else like suffer with you? Or you say, no, hey guys, you know what? I'm having a hard time. I'm dealing with this thing. I need some space, or I need you to help me with this because I need to really take care of like satisfying this investor that's giving me a hard time. And right now I'm not having a good time. Like I need y'all to handle this, right? That's like the third thing, right? Is like, how much are you emotionally intelligent and have a collective mindset to have the virtues and values that empower your people and not necessarily bring them down because of your limitations, right? And I think like I heard from a friend of mine that worked with Taupe at Calendly, who was the unicorn, that he's really good about going and I'm the glue between my people. I'm there to empower them and serve them, and I get my best ideas from my team. And it's not just about me. Like I'm a catalyst, right? Like leadership, that's a catalyst, not necessarily like one all be all.
Yeah, and I think he's a great example because it's such a simple product. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's just calendars and scheduling meetings, but it's one of the best places to work because, they have incredible leadership. But sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I went to, I don't know if you know Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL dude. I have a friend who's, his dad works with Jocko, and I was able to go to one of his like seminars, and it's all about leadership, and they draw parallels between like military leadership stuff and how you can take those same lessons and apply them into a business environment. And honestly, like I have no one in my family that's been in the military or any of that, so it was a really cool experience for me. But what I'm getting at through that is that he was kind of talking about the levels of leadership, that a true leader is often painted as like the dude who stands in front of the meeting, is barking orders, and is like the macho, like you said, end all be all, this is how it's going to be, it's me. And it's a lot of an ego thing at that point. But that it's true leadership. The true leader is the one who just, if you really have your team on point, they all know what they're supposed to be doing. You're just a facilitator, like you're saying, or the glue between all the different compartments. And I think that's something that I personally have been trying to get better at. And I think, I don't know, I feel like I was just raised to always believe that the leader was like the front speaker guy. But the older I get, and I know I'm still young, but the older I get, I feel like it's more and more attractive to empower your team, like you said, and have the ideas come through them. And another point on that is, if someone comes up with an idea themselves, if your team comes up with the idea, they'll have more accountability to see that idea come to success, because it was their idea rather than just barking an order and like, I need you to do X, Y, Z. If they suggest ABC and you as a leader just support it, they're more likely to be more invested in that plan succeeding. And those are just some takeaways. But I've been describing more and more to the silent leadership in the back, where you lead by praising, not by putting people down.
Yeah, and I think every opportunity should be an opportunity to grow. And when you're just kind of sitting there like micromanaging and telling people what to do, it makes, the business less attractive to these employees. They want to be able to, I think the way I look at it is that every company should, to some degree, be a playground for their employees, because, that's how you innovate. If you don't give people time to think or create, then you're just going to be doing the same thing over and over and over, and you're never going to create anything new.
I have a question for you on that. I think we all agree, like, if you empower the employees to be creative and bring, having 30 heads on a team is better than just operating under the one CEO. Even though they bring experience, variety of ideas can be assembled to become a better one. How do you find a balance between allowing the employees to have a playground, like Mateo said, but still not having that be a huge waste of human resources or billable hours or any of those things? How do you give the team freedom to actually not be operating out of fear and out of just orders, but be creative? But how do you corral that in a productive manner?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because on the surface, it's all about like tactics and this thesis of, like, you say playground, which what do you mean by playground, right? You mean a place that people feel safe, that they feel that they can be themselves, that they feel like they can bring their best versions of their ideas and their soul to the space, right? And I think that when you think about what a playground is, and then also like the pragmatic like bloodline of like finance within business and pragmatism, the way that I best like describe that is, or like to answer your question, like how do you cultivate and how do you balance that? I think ultimately it comes down to the mission and the ideology of the company, right? And what you mean by that is like, you as a leader, you have to start by a 0 to 1 process where you're selling a product or a service.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And why do you do that? It's because you should be involved with the problem. You should be in love with the problem, not the solution, right? How many businesses fell because product managers and engineers like want the solution to work, but the problem's just way far from it, right?
Yeah.
So if you love the problem and you love the people and you lean into who you're trying to serve, and you want them to be, and you really are aligned with that, well, at the end of the day, you'll have a business to be made, right? But you do have to be conscious of budgets. You do have to be conscious of resources and money. So I think my best way of doing that is like add these expectations on the business as part of that, where people are accountable. But as long as that's being taken care of and you're making your progress there, then you enable creativity, right? And it's like, to me, it was always, if we get this prototype built, yeah, it's going to suck. We're going to have to interview 100 people to find out what we have to build. But let's have fun doing this stuff that we know has to get done, right? And like this repetitiveness and like this really like grungy work, let's like lean into that, because we know once we do that, we can create the data we need for investors to give us like our seed check. And once we have that money, we then can earn the right to be creative, right? Yeah. So I think like the expectation around like, oh, I'm a great designer, I took this course, I crushed it in this class, I just want to do that all the time. Well, that's great, but at the same time, like, do you want to be an entrepreneur, or do you want to be a skill worker? And I think that a lot of people that think they want to be entrepreneurs aren't willing to accept the reality of like the pragmatic reality of what that is. And that means that you have to create a steady, scalable, profitable business before you can reap the benefits of what make you like content, right? And I think, a true entrepreneurs love the entire process. I know that I do, right? And I think it's just about expectations and frameworks and really thinking about, why am I here? And I think when you know that, you'll know when you're with the right people, and you'll know when you're not.
So I know we touched on it upstairs, but could you tell me a little bit about Revel and how you got involved with that? And if you're watching and you don't know what Revel is, you might have seen it. They're the black and blue scooters that are basically like all over the country. You got the opportunity to be the head of Texas. How did that happen?
Yeah. So, yeah, like after working in oil and gas and, thinking about, you go through life and you start to really define like what you want and why. I met a beautiful woman who's now my wife 5 years ago.
Congrats.
Thanks, man. And I just knew that I'm like, she's going to Houston to be a doctor. I need to really think about, opportunities outside of where I'm at. Right. And then I really loved like going through the whole ideation part of like Bitcoin mining and like, really thinking like, oh, we have to source gas and power generators and computers, and we have to put that on a Bitcoin network node. And if we tie it all together, we'll make X amount of Bitcoin and we'll be paying X amount of cash for power and for labor and for parts. So I like really loved like the process of like ideating on a business and making it happen, right? So I said I need to go and like think about how I can take these skills and like actually get into tech where like there's a lot more multiples in your value, right? If you think about leverage, it's like how much work you put into making something else happen, right? I think tech is the best place for leverage to occur currently in the world, because with like, I just have a friend who built like a SaaS marketing tool and sold it and did very well in 4 years, right? And there's very few spaces in like markets in like industries where you can work your ass off for a few years and then have like very lucrative means, right? So the multiple. So I decided like, hey, I have this skill set. I want to go work with more innovative people. I want to work in a place where I have more leverage, and I want to be closer to my fiance or my girlfriend at the time. So I said, let's just try something in tech. So I reached out to my best friend, also grew up from a very, lower income family, really disadvantaged society. And he lived down the road from me. We've been friends for 30 years. He got into Harvard Business School and worked his ass off to get there. And actually he was starting to interview at Revel. And he said, hey, I'm going to work for this company. There's kind of some overlap in energy. You should meet the founder. So I flew up to New York and met the founders. Really hit it off with the COO. He also had an energy background, and they grilled me. I had a 12-person like interview in one meeting with the founders and the entire executive team, and in 1 hour they found out whether I was going to be the person they needed, and I ended up being that I was. So I got hired as the general manager of Austin, and I moved here to launch the product. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I loved it. I think like when you have that product out in the streets and everyone can see that and everyone can interact with them and you have customers who love it, it was just beautiful to see how that product matched with tech on an app worked. So then a light bulb went in my head, and I said, wow, like this is a platform. Like the iPhone is a real estate of multiple technologies, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. You have any questions?
No, that was
okay. So, now tell us about Rex, I guess. And was the company that you were kind of the executive for under Rex, was that Prime Pro?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Please tell us about Prime Pro and like how that was.
Yeah, so that was a great project. I think, I was really fortunate that Rex and everyone in the ecosystem trusted me to launch that and work on that. Really great product manager. And we ideated on an idea to provide technology for Latino workers. So the product was really a workflow management tool to specifically empower and organize workers, bringing tech to businesses that didn't use them. Mm-hmm. So we learned a whole lot, launched that product, and generated revenue. And then I started thinking about, like, after 2 years working there and really worked with a lot of great people, lots of great people. If you look at who's a part of Rex on LinkedIn and see the things they're doing now, and some of them are still there, I decided to leave because the opportunity to help start a venture capital fund came about. So really left Revel because of COVID. We pulled out because no one was writing during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I then decided to join Rex and enjoyed that, and now helping build a venture capital fund.
I have a question about Revel. What was the first? I think Lime was like well before, right? How did you when you joined Revel? How did you join that space? And there's like lift scooters,
and birds.
Yeah, birds look pretty. Revel's like the motor biked ones too.
It was a moped, yeah.
Moped, yeah.
Like actually on the road, yeah. So yeah, you mean like what was it like to compete in that space?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were kind of like the only moped provider, right?
Yeah, we were the only motorized vehicle license on the road.
Yeah, I actually rode a few, and I remember thinking like, damn, like this is really it's different than a Lime and but I guess it kind of serves the same purpose, but you can actually ride it on the street, and that was I don't even know. I'd never ridden a moped before, and I actually got on one. And Mateo actually hurt himself on
On a line.
on a line.
Like one of my first times riding one, I like cut open my chin.
Oh.
I have a scar, but I always wanted to ride a Revel, but I was just scared because I
Yep.
didn't have like a motorcycle license or anything, and I just
You don't need one, right?
I didn't want to
No.
hurt myself.
No, it's all good. Actually, the mopeds are a lot safer than those kick scooters.
Yeah, yeah.
You had a helmet.
Yeah.
And hats off to, I think like Revel's done a lot of good for New York City. And when you think about like the costs and the friction of like commuting, like the fact that you can jump on, it's just a great tool that serves the community. Even here, when we were in Austin, we had a lot of tech workers that were saving, buying cars and parking space. And we were working with Movability, which is a great Austin program. And it was phenomenal, right? So
They're electric, right?
they're electric.
How do you do you have like a juicer program, the same as Lime? Or?
Yeah, we had our own team that would swap the batteries out.
Okay,
Oh,
so
got
you wouldn't open that to consumers where they could like load them up to their back of their truck. And,
No,
like,
it was
okay,
like non-gig. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. 'Cause
Actually, some pretty gnarly stuff happened when Lime. I remember talking to people during COVID. Lime made a contract with contractors that they would make them pay for like X amount of money to actually take over them and rent them, and then the contractors would actually have a percentage of revenue. I think, and this is me speculating, I think that they knew that the mopeds weren't the kick scooters were not going to sell, so they normalized their revenue by charging a lot of more money to lease them out. Say, hey, you take them over, pay us X amount of dollars, and then you keep X percent of the revenue, like 90%. But they knew no one was going to ride them, so I think they hustled a lot of contractors just to normalize
survive the pandemic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
It's business, I guess.
I don't know. It's not.
Yeah,
the
not
value
It's not
really.
is-
good business.
Not good
yeah.
business.
Not good
That's kind of messed up, but yeah, I mean, COVID kind of blindsided a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
And that's just pure speculation based off of what I was told on the street. It could be false.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. I mean, well, the juicer program and all that is that program still going on where they can get like the rev share?
I don't know. I've not been involved in mobility for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a few years now.
So with Prime Pro, one thing that I was wondering, because my business was a little similar in a way. Like we had the core idea of we were working with small businesses and we were trying to get these small businesses that hadn't necessarily adopted technology in the marketing space to adopt that technology. And obviously like we had a problem penetrating that. So what did you guys do? And what do you think made you successful with trying to get in front of those people?
Yeah, I think that when you really understand like the mindset of like a contractor or in like a week to week business like that, they really just want to get more work, right? So when you're able to actually offer those things where they have the ability on the platform to provide more work or maybe do more with less, it's just really getting down to understanding like what your customer really wants and what they're trying to get out of it. And I think most tech entrepreneurs, just in general, in my experience, especially the more technical you are, you don't prioritize go-to-market, right? And go-to-market has its own infrastructure, well, like marketing infrastructure and engineering work that goes into it, and data and iteration and experimentation and content generation. So it's very much a very iterative experimental game. So I think for us, like when we cracked it, it was really just understanding like and not assuming what our customer needs were. Like I think the best like go-to-market and the best like product managers don't ever say, yeah, my customer is going to love that. No, like their customer will tell you, right? You never know. Like you depend on the outputs of data to tell you that adoption is happening. And again, that's always like falling in love with the problem, not the solution, is what gets you to adopt. So I think with the demographic, it was really putting the tech and the solution in such a way that they specifically were used to and wanted to hear was, hey, this is going to help you to get more work.
Gotcha. So I think we finally got to the point of why you wanted to come on the show today. So tell us a little bit more. You brushed on it, but tell us a little bit more about Top Line.
Yeah, man. I think we're still just barely coming out of the woodwork. Like this is actually my first and really funny. I haven't even told my partner I'm going to be on here, which I'll tell him later.
Nice.
But no, he's a good guy. Really good dude. You get to a point in life where you specifically think about okay, what am I chasing? What am I here to do? Right. And I'm a huge fan of I'm sure a lot of you have read it, Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey, Texan Values. And I think he's done a good job in his own life describing a lot of psychological and also spiritual things and that already exist. And I think it's really cool whenever you live life and then you start to think about oh, that's how this is. And turns out that's some wisdom that someone else already found out. And I think Matthew McConaughey's done a really good job defining a lot of this really enriched human nature and wisdom in his own way, right? And I think I relate to that book because a lot of the symbology there is a lot Texan. It's very Texan, and I'm from Texas too. So really, when I think about what it is that I want to do is, one, I want to decentralize the accessibility of ideas and frameworks and resources so that all entrepreneurs that are disadvantaged can access it more readily, right? And what that means is thinking about my journey, in my 15 years of being out of, and working, and also 10 years of innovating and hustling. What I've kind of known is how exhausted I become of being brave and walking into a room with everything internally fighting me backwards, right? Whether it was the shame of the Latino culture of oh, you're not good enough or you're ugly or whatever it is, there's a lot of shame in lots of cultures that keeps people from thinking that they deserve to be there or they specifically have the skill sets to be there or that they can learn the skill sets to be there, right? And it took me forever to learn that my intelligence and my capabilities are not fixed, right? I can learn them. I can cultivate them. So essentially what I came across, after leaving Rex and really focusing on okay, what do I want to do now? Right. I know how to build tech. I know how to raise money. I have a lot of people that trust me. There's a lot of people that I want to serve and I want to do goodwill for. What do I want to do next? So I said, okay. While I was figuring that out, I ran into my friend Tomas and he said, I'm building a fund. We're investing in overlooked entrepreneurs. We're fixing on STEM-backed people. And STEM, if you say STEM in the Latino community or underrepresented, that got so many people out of poverty, right? Like engineers in the 80s, and whether you worked for Boeing or you worked for Texas Instruments, right? Or you worked for Dell. Think about how many Latino and underrepresented families have gotten out of poverty and have been able to do better and actually live a better life and live in the top of Maslow's hierarchy because of STEM, right? So taking my experience and taking this vision, we're building Top Line Ventures to invest in overlooked pioneers who are building the future through technology, which is investing in those entrepreneurs who have not had the resources, had not have the mentorship, but that have the subject matter expert in what they're building to just change the world, right? And we're finding this with Latinos who are great development engineers that are building amazing tools, also with women, not necessarily, there's some Ukrainian immigrants that we're coming across. And unfortunately, what I found too is that many investors and venture capitalists don't specifically do the work to meet entrepreneurs where they are.
Yeah.
It's very much of find time on my calendar. I got all this deal flow. And to me, it's wait a second, what's more rare? For you to have a company that scales 1,000x and you did the work and you are crushing it, or someone who's cutting you a check, right? If you're an entrepreneur with a really badass 1% solution, how many options from investors do you have?
Less than you think.
Well, yes, exactly. Less than you think. in terms of that's accessible, right? But there's a lot more money out there than there is good businesses, right? So that's my point, right? So why should it be? Why should it be less than we think, right? Because of a culture of scarcity, because there's no roadmap to actually how to build a venture capital fund, because very few investors really help empower others to raise funds, right? So 100%, like, to me now it's just all about anarchy. I want to build the best fund. I want to empower the most entrepreneurs, and I want to change the culture of venture capital.
I think a big issue with venture capital right now that I've seen in my experience is it can be a game of hype. A lot of it can be a game of hype for certain funds and in certain markets. You know, there's been buzzwords. There's been times where, like, for example, when Web3 was really big and popping off a couple of years ago,
Right.
people were throwing money at ideas, just ideas, not even products, but just ideas that never really came to fruition. You're kind of seeing it a little bit right now with AI.
Right.
I think AI is definitely more tangible than
Right.
some of those Web3 startups. But, you know, I do agree with what you were saying earlier. You mentioned that there's biases in venture capital, and I completely 100% agree. I think there's a lot of biases here in Austin with some of the more traditional venture capital firms. And, you know, it's not hard to see when you look at the number. It's 3% of Black and Latino founders. They get 3% of venture capital funding. And I'm sure, you know, that's even less for female founders, whatever. Yeah. And so I think the culture needs to change. And obviously, you know, I really commend you for doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, man. No, of course. No, it's a pleasure to serve. I think what you find is you truly don't get your purpose or you see what you're made of until you serve other people. And I think that this is the best way that I could serve, is by being a good conduit of, like, very successful people that have earned their money and being a good steward of their money and my own money to invest in the right people. Right. And I think that that's, you know, McKinsey just released a study that it's an untapped opportunity. Right. And I think that my challenge to a lot of those that are like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm female, we call it overlooked. We don't say really underestimated, or we don't say BIPOC. We specifically don't want to be a firm that, you know, is going to say, hey, you forgot about us, we're going to feel guilty. You should feel guilty, give us money, and then we go and make bad investment decisions. Like, that's not what we want, because that doesn't help create the change of perspective. What helps create the perception around what our demographics and what we're able is the output. Right. And you look at the output of the Latino community, and it's so successful given very few resources and very fewer industries. Why? Because of the growth mindset, because of the progress mindset. Right. So I think, like, it's really difficult. You should not, very complicated situation. You should not say, oh, all VCs are entitled or all VCs are bad. No, like, you've got great entrepreneurs out there that are doing good stuff, that are doing the work, that are just not in the public eye. Right. They're out there. But I do think that in general, because a founder is a little, like, shy, or their deck needs a little bit of work, or their finances could be a little bit more tuned, that they're not expressing their value proposition super well, that only because they lack a few of these things doesn't necessarily mean that their company, their business, and their idea isn't worth cultivating. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's really funny when you have, like, FOMO investing happening, where people throw money at different ideas, but then they're not willing to invest in, like, because of a few characteristics that kind of is off-putting. I would rather put my money on that founder that just needs a little bit of polishing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Then follow the herd. Right. It just happened the other day. I'm part of a very awesome and I think a bit exclusive angel network, and they brought a deal. Happened to be a Latino founder. Everyone wanted to do it, and I was like, love the person, love the intention, but I just thought the product didn't have sustainable value.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was more content and more first to market advantage, which there'll be a business, but that's just one I felt comfortable investing in. Right. So, I think that there's also a real interesting thing here is like, you should think about what it is, what are the characteristics and the values that make a good business and you a good candidate for investment, and focus on those things. Right. And I think to me, I just want to do more work. I want to do more hustle. I want to provide more resources. I want to build more infrastructure. The reason why Silicon Valley works so well is because of the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Look at Y Combinator, look how many deals they have, look at the different VCs. They have incredible infrastructure. We need more infrastructure that helps a lot more pre-seed and seed investors and founders get to the table.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the hardest part, right? Because that's literally like getting your foot in the door. It's difficult to get your foot in the door. A lot of people, right? The statistic is 9 out of 10 founders fail. I think those 9 that fail don't get that first check. So there's not, and not to say that everybody should be able to get their foot in the door. Like it does need to be somewhat exclusive, but exclusive in the way that it's legit. But
competitive, not exclusive.
Competitive, yes, it needs to be competitive. But yeah, I do think that there's work to be done there, and I think that's really good.
Yeah, I like how you frame the whole overlooked, so it doesn't have that implication of that they're undervalued, that they're less than. It's simply you're more placing the fact that they haven't gotten any attention on the people who are not willing to give it to them for factors that shouldn't be a factor, like their Latino background or other things. How do you go about identifying these overlooked individuals, or what parameters do you look at I know you want to help people that are overlooked. Specifically, how do you identify them, and how do you, if there's like a kid at UT who wants to start something, how would you be able to identify them amongst, the sea of people who are trying to start something?
Yeah, look, I think it's like whenever you're trying to find like good friends, right? It's like, if you do what everyone else is doing, what's the probability that you're going to find good people? But if you're doing the work, you're joining the community, and you're serving a community, that's where you find like the people that you most align with in values and that have the drive and the outputs that you specifically want to align with, right? So I do what those founders do, right? I do my best to find them in their ecosystem, find them working and collaborating with the same people and others that they do, right? So to me, like, I want to identify as a server and as an empowerer of founders, and as like a catalyst to more resources and to a framework that works, not necessarily as like, hey, pitch me, here's our cash, right? And I think that there are great investors and they are great VC funds, but I think it's like you need someone that's willing to take a risk on the right people, because they have the background, they have understanding, and they're willing to do the work to know them better. And I think that it's not like, as a pure capitalist, it's really dumb to not go where the wells are, and actually spend time where they're at, and then find a good opportunity and a good partner, right? So I think the culture, I think a bit of like, hey, when everyone's looking for you, whenever you're collecting these fees, whenever your days, you're not, if the revenue is going to keep coming at the end of the month, whether you talk to 10 or 5 more founders anyways, right? You have to have that element of hunger, right? And I think that's what I hope to bring. Is I want to bring the values, the grit, the grind, and the mental model of an aspiring hustle entrepreneur into the venture capital space.
Awesome.
Well, I guess we made it through most of the career related stuff. So one last thing I'd love to ask you are, what are some of your hobbies? It's the weekend right now. It's Friday.
Yeah.
So what are things that you typically do on the weekend to unwind? I know you mentioned you wanted to go to a concert this weekend, but what are some of your interests?
Yeah. So, man, like, I'm pretty obsessive with like thinking that I'm leveling up. So my wife and my friends give me shit because I listen to podcasts and audiobooks in the gym, right? Which is really funny because I produce electronic music.
No way.
Right? And I think that's like,
Wow.
yeah. So I grew up playing guitar and mariachi. Actually,
Yes, sir.
played mariachi music in college. And that's what I helped paid for my school.
Nice.
On the weekends. So I play guitar and sing. So love the guitar. I actually restrung my guitar last night. And, I love creating music, both electronic music and also on the guitar. I've DJ'd in town, and I actually love being in my studio more than I like being behind a deck.
Uh-huh.
Because I think like serving other people and like providing a good experience and playing music is really fun. But it's like what I learn about myself whenever I'm making music and what I'm discovering. Like, to me, that's very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Like being vulnerable with myself in the creative process of making music, of like finding the right chords or the right words. Like, to me, that's a very like sacred activity. So yeah, I love to produce music. I love to play guitar. On the weekends, my wife and I really like to try new good foods and friends. Like, I think my favorite thing to do is have like 3-hour conversations with good people and dinner and learn from them and see what they're about. And, travel to Santa Monica a lot. Have a buddy that has a place in Venice Beach, and we just love just exploring and enjoying that. It's just a fun place to have a good time. I have friends in New York, and, love going to music festivals still. I kind of got into it a little older. I was 27 when I went to my first music festival. I saw Kungs, which is a French DJ at Coachella, and it just completely changed my life. That was like my eureka moment with electronic music. So yeah, going to Tomorrowland in a couple weeks,
Awesome.
and just living life and doing my best to hustle, man.
Who's your favorite electronic artist?
Oh man, that one's easy. Lost Frequencies.
Okay, I haven't heard of them. I'll have to check them out. I'm a big Aphex Twin fan. I'm kind of more on the like experimental side.
Got it.
And I've been
This guy
I also
taste.
really like Death Grips. I don't know if you know about Death Grips. But they're kind of electronic. They're a little just like all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm also a musician. I was in a band in high school. I play guitar, bass, and drums.
Nice.
And I'm actually trying to work on and start a new musical project right now. Because to be honest with you, I haven't had the time to make music in the past 4 years. So that's one thing I'm really excited about right now, is to kind of get back into that. And I have some tracks I can show you. You'll probably be like, what the hell? These are really weird. But I want to, my idea or my vision is like, I want to mix acoustic sounds and electronic sounds.
Nice.
Ideally in a way to where I could use one to transition to the other. So, and I'm also really into like glitch music or like glitchy stuff. So like some of the stuff I made is like just random noises that are going to be kind of like played on a sampler and used as like transitional pieces. But I'm a total gearhead. Like, I don't know. Do you use digital or like analog synthesizers?
No, I use DAW. Everything is in my Apple Logic Pro.
Got you. Yeah, I'm actually using Logic Pro right now. But I've been really looking into synths lately, and I want to buy some. I want to kind of start with some of the drum machine sequencers, and
Nice.
I don't know if you've ever played with those, but you can make some like really really cool bass sounds or even just drum sounds with some of those sequencers. And there's like a synth store here. And I kind of just got curious one day and walked in there, and I was like, this is cool. This
Nice.
is like my new journey.
That's cool. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I've been trying to make myself pick up an instrument because I never really did growing up. I just always was more of a I'd go to Kumon and learn math or go play basketball, and that was my parents ran a flower shop in El Paso, so I was always helping out, barriendo, and just helping around. So now I want to do. I'm between piano or guitar, but I haven't decided. And now that I'm graduated, I feel like I want to have like a hobby outside of just like going. I've been kind of like split between the entrepreneur and student life, and now that I'm just strictly on the business side, I feel like I have some energy to devote to some kind of music that I want to learn.
I think you should do piano.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very translational to like all the other instruments. So if you learn piano, I feel like you can pick up guitar, bass, drums very easily.
Nice.
I started with bass actually, and then I went to guitar, and then I went to drums. I still don't really know how to play piano, so that's one thing I also am trying to
I
learn.
guess I got to do it.
Maybe we can learn together.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're kind of at an hour. We probably wrap it up. But is there anything that you want to leave the people with? Any pieces of advice for the young entrepreneurs, and things you want to let them know?
Yeah, I think it's a privilege to have a voice here today, and I think it's really important to think of yourself as something that can be refactored. If you think of your mind and like your experience in life, like your upbringing as a child or your tribulations in life, like your suffering is the best place for you to cultivate who you want to become. And transitioning from those things from stopping you, whether that was, like shameful things in family or, lots of like cultural tolerances, whether it was like alcoholism or abuse, or any sort of things that keep you from thinking that you're intelligent enough or worthy enough or have the skills to do it. Like all of that stuff can be changed and refactored. It just takes time. And I think ultimately, willing to do the work and willing to, learn the right things and put the right ideas in your head, like everything is possible. And I think you should just try. If you go to the store and you buy a piece of gum, you're paying for a product that you're going to use and chew. Like that's all business is. So if you think about selling, building an app or getting into real estate, or providing a service, or like, maybe you want to be a tax business, whatever it be, like your process in your mind and your advice and your knowledge of something is a commodity that can be traded and you can get paid for that. So I think it's just all about the leverage, right? You have at the basis your knowledge of your process that you sell for time. And then after time, you're able to put that money into assets like real estate or tech, and that stuff multiplies. But then also you have content that you create and sell, and you keep doing that, and that also brings cash, right? So I think, ultimately, really understand what service and what product you want to provide for the world that you can get behind, and just start doing it, and and with prototypes or talking to people, and you'll find that, most reason why most people don't start businesses, or that most people, don't take the leap, is just because of some mental block from them not willing to refactor their mind, right? So I think it's very possible, it's very doable, and I can't wait to see more and more overlooked entrepreneurs add great products and services to the rest of humanity. So I think it's very needed.
And how can the people reach you?
Yeah, it's really simple. Just on LinkedIn, Jose A. Ortega. Happy to send my personal email, which is really simple. It's Jose, Jose.A.Ortega@outlook.com. Just my name and my middle name. So Jose.A.Ortega@outlook.com. Feel free to reach out.
All right. You want to send us off?
That wraps up episode 11. If you listen to this, I hope you got inspired, and let's get to refactoring.
Peace.
Till next time.